911, what's your emergency?
He's gone! He's gone! A crocodile just pulled him in. There's blood. He was filming by the river.
Stay calm. Who was taken?
David Vance. He was alone. He screamed and it dragged him under.
What began as a solo wildlife shoot on the banks of the East Alligator River ended in seconds. David Vance, renowned survivalist and filmmaker, was dragged to his death by a crocodile he believed he understood. His final moments, recorded on camera now, serve as a chilling reminder: nature doesn't offer second takes. If this story shakes you, subscribe for more real cautionary tales. Like, share, and discuss how we balance admiration with respect for the wild. David Vance was not your average wildlife enthusiast, was a man shaped by danger, trained to operate in it, and ultimately consumed by it. At 38 years old, David had carved a unique space for himself as a survivalist filmmaker in Australia's most unforgiving terrains. His background as a former Army reconnaissance officer gave him the discipline and instincts many believe set him apart from typical content creators, and his transition from soldier to conservationist was rooted in a personal mission to show the world that understanding, not fear, was the true path to coexisting with nature's most feared predators. His YouTube channel, Vance Wild, exploded in popularity over the last 5 years, amassing over 500 subscribers drawn to his close-range encounters with crocodiles, venomous snakes, and even the notoriously aggressive cassowary. David's brand was built on the mantra, "Know the beast, respect the beast," a phrase he repeated in nearly every episode as he crouched mere feet away from apex predators most people would flee from. His fans adored his calm demeanor and meticulous field notes, and his Patreon community regularly funded trips into Australia's remotest corners, where he filmed with minimal crew and maximum risk. Yet to those who worked closely with him, a darker edge had begun to surface. His longtime collaborator and drone operator, Jack Leland, once remarked, "David used to draw a line. Lately, I wasn't sure he saw it anymore." That line, the one between calculated danger and reckless provocation, seemed to blur further with every upload. Despite his public image of control, his growing obsession with crocodiles had begun to worry even seasoned rangers. He referred to them not just as animals, but as the last dinosaurs, creatures that, in his eyes, carried an ancient wisdom humans had yet to truly comprehend. In a now haunting interview, he claimed he could read a croc's body language better than some people's. "They don't lie," he said, looking directly into the camera. "They show you everything if you're willing to look." That statement, once celebrated as poetic insight, now reads like a premonition. Locals in the Northern Territory, where David often filmed, spoke of him with reverence. "He's fearless," said one ranger, "but not reckless. He never disrespects the land or the animals." But others noticed a shift. His recent videos showed tighter close-ups, longer lingering shots, and moments where he appeared just a little too close, a little too trusting. Some speculated he was feeling the pressure to maintain engagement in a saturated online space. One ranger, who had guided him years earlier, confessed, "He started pushing harder. I told him these animals don't care about your subscribers." That warning, like many others, went unheeded. David's drive to capture the raw, unfiltered reality of predator behavior earned him global acclaim. But it also became the very trait that led him into a final encounter with a creature that neither knew nor cared for fame, passion, or respectantly instinct. The crocodile that ended David Vance's life wasn't a stranger, it was a 16-foot male known by local rangers and researchers as Moson, a territorial giant who had ruled a bend of the East Alligator River in the Northern Territory for over a decade. Among locals, Moson was infamous. Among scientists, he was a case study in unshakable predatory instinct. But to David, he was something else, entirely an old mate. In several past videos, David had referred to Moson by name, pointing out the croc's distinct scarring and measured movements with admiration. "He's not just any croc," David once said. "He's calculated," he thinks. That personification, the belief that Moson possessed a unique awareness, even a sort of mutual respect, was both part of David's appeal and the core of the danger he failed to acknowledge. In truth, no crocodile is tame. As herpetologist Dr. Lyle Prescott stated bluntly in an interview years prior, "There is no taming a croc. You can only be lucky." Until you're not. The area David chose for his final shoot was deep in croc territory during the dry season when riverbanks shrink and territorial aggression peaks. Mating season had begun, and adult males like Moson were known to defend their stretch of river with relentless ferocity. Park rangers had posted warnings in the region for weeks, and multiple incidents had already occurred involving livestock and one unconfirmed human encounter upstream. Yet the day before his disappearance, David was spotted by two fishermen walking the riverbank alone, wearing light clothing and no visible weapon, just his pack and camera gear. According to them, he waved, smiled, and kept walking, crouching occasionally to examine tracks near the muddy bank. Unbeknownst to them, David was executing a new concepted, entirely silent stalking sequence, shot with a head-mounted GoPro and overhead drone, designed to immerse viewers in a predator's eye view. It was his boldest attempt yet to show a crocodile's world without barriers. That same night, he posted what would be his final update to Instagram, a serene image of the riverbank at dusk with the caption, "One last look." To fans, it felt like poetry. To wildlife officials, it now reads like a veiled goodbye. Behind the lens, David saw storytelling. Behind the reeds, Moson saw nothing but movement. Dr. Prescott, when asked about the psychology of habituated crocodiles, those who've encountered humans regularly, gave a chilling insight. They're not less dangerous. They're more, because they don't fear you. They don't hesitate. Moson had been filmed before, possibly even conditioned by the non-threatening presence of camera crews, drones, and cautious adventurers. But all it takes is one shift a foot closer, a rustle too loud, a gaze misread. In that ancient, opaque mind, there are no second chances. For David, the boundary between fascination and fatal error was already dissolving, even as he admired the fading light off the river that would become his last scene. In the final hours before his death, David Vance was utterly alone by choice. He had turned down the offer of a local guide, brushing it off with a confident smile and a casual, "I've got it covered," when a park ranger suggested escorting him into the more volatile bends of the East Alligator River. David declined again, assuring them he knew where not to step. His confidence, once rooted in discipline and experience, had evolved into something more dangerous: certainty. The journal recovered from his pack days later, slightly waterlogged but legible, contained a chilling line. "If this works, it'll be the cleanest sequence I've ever shot." David had meticulously set up multiple cameras that morning, his usual DSLR rig on a tripod, a GoPro strapped to his chest, and a compact drone positioned for aerial shots. He was planning a sequence without narration, without music, just the ambient tension of predator and prey in their shared space. Witnesses from a passing tour boat later recalled seeing him crouched near a cluster of reeds, elbows on his knees, one hand holding a remote. "He looked focused," one tourist said, "like he was trying to listen to something only he could hear." But what none of them realized in that moment was that David had wandered into a known basking zone, a stretch of soft, sun-baked mud favored by large males like Moson. Rangers had marked it just 2 weeks prior, after fresh tracks and a partial livestock kill were found nearby. Even worse, David had reportedly positioned himself near a narrow entry trail, a sort of croc highway leading from the waterline into dense vegetation. One wrong footstep there, and the ambush odds skyrocket. Compounding the danger was the day's suffocating heat. With temperatures over 40 degrees Celsius, the crocodiles were more active, more aggressive, their metabolism and hormones surging with the season. Locals know to stay out of the water during these times. David, however, seemed undeterred. According to two fishermen casting nearby, he was seen slapping the water's surface with a stick, a tactic commonly used to draw crocodiles out of hiding. "It was like he wanted to trigger something," one of them said, still visibly shaken. "We thought he knew what he was doing." Moments later, they spotted his drone rising slowly into the air, hovering above the reeds. Then came the screaming. The first sound was a sharp, guttural cry, followed by frantic splashing and a yell cut short. The fishermen rushed to help, but by the time they reached the spot, the water had already stilled, save for the slow drift of the GoPro bobbing on its mount. That morning had begun with cinematic ambition, a plan to give his audience a window into the pure, unfiltered world of a crocodile's domain. But as his cameras recorded in silence, David had misjudged one critical truth. When you bait the wild doesn't follow your script. It writes its own, in teeth and blood. The attack, when pieced together from David's body cam, stationary tripod footage, drone visuals, and eyewitness accounts, was horrifying in both its speed and finality. At 6:43 a.m., David was seen crouched beside the water, his posture relaxed, focused entirely on the movement of his drone as it hovered 20 feet above. Beneath the surface, concealed by reeds and shaded mud, Moson had been waiting silent, still, invisible. It was classic ambush behavior. Crocodiles don't stalk, they erupt. At 6:45, the reeds trembled. In less than a second, Moson lunged forward with terrifying force. David's body cam jolted violently as he began to rise, his head whipping toward the sound, but it was already too late. The scream that followed, caught in full by the microphone on his chest rig, was short and sharp, a sudden jolt of panic, followed by frenzied splashing. The tripod camera captured the initial momenta blur of movement as David toppled sideways into the shallows, arms flailing, the reeds parting violently behind him. Then the croc's head emerged, jaws clamped firmly around David's right thigh. A crushing force of over 3.0 psi snapped through flesh and bone, causing immediate dislocation at the hip. The crocodile, as instinct dictated, began a death roll, twisting rapidly, dragging David into deeper water. In the drone's feed, now archived by investigators, a swirl of dark red bloomed beneath the surface like ink. David's body rolled once, twice, then disappeared entirely. Only a single boot, torn from his foot during the spin, remained afloat, slowly drifting toward the bank. The entire struggle lasted less than 20 seconds. Then, silence. The reeds settled. The river became still again, as if nothing had occurred. Hours later, when rangers arrived after the 911 call, they found David's tripod camera still recording. The lens was smeared with mud and tilted slightly upward, aimed at the now empty clearing where he had stood. The footage ran for another hour, recording nothing but bird calls, distant insect drone, and the faint rustle of the breeze. As news of David's death spread, crocodile sightings along that stretch of river spiked. Locals reported seeing Moson several times in the following days, larger and bolder than ever, frequently surfacing near the same bank where the attack took place. One ranger described it as claiming the spot, a known behavior where a dominant male crocodile marks a successful ambush site as part of its territory. Scientists would later confirm from footage that the croc bore the same facial scarring as Moson distinctive claw marks across the snout, likely from earlier fights. For David, the cameras he so carefully arranged became silent witnesses to his final moments, recording not just the collapse of his body, but the collapse of a belief. A belief that proximity equals understanding, that respect guarantees safety. In the eyes of the crocodile, there were no myths, no admiration, no cameras, only movement, only opportunity. And in the moment David crossed an unseen line, Moson didn't hesitate. He simply did what crocodiles have done for millions of years. She struck. The search for David Vance stretched across 2 agonizing days, a coordinated operation between park rangers, drone teams, and local volunteers. Boats combed the riverbanks, while helicopters scanned the murky currents from above. On the second afternoon, nearly 48 hours after his last footage ended in chaos, a ranger spotted a dark shape snagged against a tangle of fallen branches 2 kilometers downstream. It was David's body, mangled, waterlogged, but largely intact. The forensic report later revealed the cause of death as a combination of exsanguination from deep puncture wounds to the thigh and severe internal trauma caused by the death roll, which fractured ribs and dislocated joints. His gear was found nearby: a shredded pack, a cracked drone controller, and his still recording body cam, memory card intact. Within hours, wildlife officials identified a massive saltwater crocodile measuring just under 5 meters lurking near the same stretch of bank. It was captured, tranquilized, and euthanized. Tissue samples from the croc's stomach matched David's DNA. Though many agreed the action was necessary to prevent further human danger, it sparked debate online about human responsibility in such encounters. Was it justice or a cover-up? Public reaction to David's death was immediate and sharply divided. His YouTube channel, once a haven for respectful wildlife education, was flooded with emotional tributes, reposted clips of his greatest moments, and thousands of grieving comments. Fans mourned him as a courageous advocate for understanding nature, a man who walked the edge so others didn't have to. But not all were sympathetic. Critics, including wildlife experts and fellow conservationists, pointed to a growing trend among solo content creators risk-taking as performance. "This wasn't nature's cruelty," one comment read. "It was hubris disguised as education." Even those closest to David struggled to reconcile his legacy. At his funeral, live-streamed to over 300 viewers, his sister spoke plainly. "David loved the wild, but he wasn't invincible. Please don't mythologize risk. Learn from it." The ceremony was held in a modest outdoor chapel surrounded by eucalyptus trees, with birdsong echoing between tearful eulogies. His casket was draped in khaki and earth tone signature look, and beside it stood a framed still from his final drone footage. The river, calm and golden under the dawn light. Days later, his final video was released in a censored, posthumous form. The footage cut moments before the attack, leaving viewers with silence and a black screen, followed by the words, "In memory of David Vance. Respect the wild." The upload reignited conversations around the ethics of wildlife filming, particularly the growing genre of lone adventurers broadcasting intimate proximity to deadly animals. Should platforms flag this content? Should guidelines be rewritten? Experts warned of a dangerous mythosome that valorizes closeness over caution, spectacle over safety. David's story, once a chronicle of admiration, had become a case study in the fine line between documentary and daredevilry. His cameras may have stopped rolling, but the questions he left behind about risk, responsibility, and the performative gaze into the eyes of nature continued to echo, one ripple at a time. In the weeks following David Vance's death, a wave of expert analysis began to flood both academic circles and mainstream media, attempting to dissect how a seasoned wildlife professional could fall victim to what many called a preventable tragedy. At the heart of every explanation was a brutal truth about crocodiles. They are the ultimate ambush predators, capable of remaining motionless underwater for more than 2 hours, their eyes and nostrils barely breaching the surface. By the time a target detects movement, it's already too late. This biological advantage has been refined over 200 million years and is unaffected by human presence, compassion, or intention. Dr. Ploston, Lyle Prescott, a leading crocodilian behaviorist and longtime critic of solo wildlife filmmaking, offered perhaps the most haunting perspective in a televised interview. David's tragedy wasn't courage. It was miscalibrated intimacy with an animal that does not reciprocate. The idea that David had confused emotional connection for safety became a recurring theme. He had spent years building narratives around coexistence, narrating his closeness to predators as evidence of mutual respect, but to the crocodile, he was never more than motion in the water. Prescott described this dynamic as the habituation paradox, the notion that animals frequently exposed to humans can actually become more dangerous. Unlike wild animals that instinctively avoid unfamiliar beings, habituated predators can lose their caution, perceiving humans not as a threat, but as part of the environment, sometimes as prey. Park rangers echoed this concern. One, who had met David on multiple occasions, recounted, "We tried to warn him, again and again. That croc didn't know who he was. It just saw a silhouette moving near its basking zone." The failure was not in David's knowledge, but in the false sense of immunity that sometimes comes with familiarity. He had documented crocs, without incident so many times that he began to believe his presence was understood and accepted. But nature does not understand stories. It does not accept gestures. It only acts. The rise of online influencers, particularly those dubbed predator whisperers, has further complicated the narrative. These individuals, often operating solo, cultivate massive audiences by showcasing their proximity to dangerous animals, wrapped in messages of love and connection. But critics argue that this blurs the line between education and recklessness. The performative nature of content creation encourages escalation, closer shots, bolder movements, tighter frame saw in pursuit of viewer engagement. David, by all accounts, never set out to be a thrill seeker, but he became swept up in the same algorithmic cycle of spectacle. What was once a quiet reverence for wild creatures became a calibrated choreography for the lens. Experts now cite his case in seminars and safety briefings, using his story as a visceral reminder that admiration, however genuine, does not alter biology. Crocodiles are not villains. They are not symbols. They are simply apex survivors driven, not by malice, but by instinct. David Vance believed he had earned their trust, but in the end, trust was never part of the equation. David Vance didn't die chasing fame, died trying to prove something, not just to his audience, but to himself. His entire career had been built on the belief that with enough respect, preparation, and understanding, the line between man and predator could be softened, even momentarily blurred. But in the end, nature doesn't care about human resolve. It doesn't weigh intent or respect. It responds only to movement, to opportunity, to the rhythm of instinct honed across eons. David's last steps into that riverbank were not careless, they were deliberate, even reverent. But reverence is not armor. Today, his story is etched into the curriculum of wildlife safety seminars, not as a condemnation, but as a caution. Rangers across Australia cite his name when teaching new recruits the limits of proximity. Documentarians replay his final footage in private sessions, reminding crews that no shot is worth a silence that never ends. A simple plaque now stands near the spot where he was taken, a modest stone embedded in the earth beside a roped-off section of the East Alligator River. It bears his name, the image of a crocodile carved beneath it, and a single line, "In awe, but never above." Visitors who read it often pause, their eyes drifting toward the water beyond the rope. Some take photos, others simply walk away in silence. For the ones who knew him best, the pain is more complicated. They remember not just the expert, the filmmaker, the quiet intensity with which he studied the world, but also the man who had begun to believe his relationship with nature was unique, that his understanding could transcend biology. He called the crocodile his companion, but the wild never agreed. In the digital space he once ruled, his channel remains preserved. Every video, every caption, every moment of breathless admiration still plays. But it's different now. The comments reflect it, the tone shifted, the questions heavier. Was it worth it? Did he know this was coming? Are we respecting nature or trying to tame it for views? These aren't just questions about David. They're questions about an entire culture, a generation drawn to the thrill of closeness without the cost. His legacy is not a warning against curiosity, it's a reckoning with its consequences. In trying to pull the wild into our narratives, we often forget. The wild has no script. It doesn't wait for retakes, it doesn't read our reverence. It only knows what moves, what threatens, what can be claimed. And in that final equation, no number of cameras, no years of experience, and no depth of love can buy immunity. Just silence. Just still water. Just the echo of a lesson learned too late.